Sherrie, what inspired you to write The Language of Drawing?
You know, I think that there has been a tendency amongst art students to get away from drawing. And there are several reasons. I mean, one is that a lot of art students are not learning how to draw, and which then makes painting much, much more difficult. And the other thing is, in the art schools, when they do teach drawing, they tend to be teaching, focusing just on three things: anatomy, standard proportions, and perspective. Now, these are all things that an artist needs to know, but what is happening is it's making it a much more mechanical thing instead of getting into actually what artists really deal with in terms of what drawing is actually a way to teach someone how to see as an artist. And so that's really why I wrote the book, because I just didn't see that information out there.
Well, you mentioned, I believe in your introduction, that when you first went to New York and you thought you'd done a lot of studying and you knew how to draw, but your drawing instructor kept saying, you need to draw around.
Right.
And you couldn't figure out for quite a while what he meant by draw around, and he wouldn't explain it.
And he wouldn't explain it. Exactly. Well, and that is that whole thing of how to see like an artist, so that an artist isn't seeing flat. An artist is really seeing 360 degrees around the object. So when you're really learning how to draw, you're actually learning how to look at something and see it in 3D as though you could walk around it. And so your vision actually starts circling the object, so you actually really see all around the objects. It's a whole different way of viewing something, and that took some time.
Well, you talk a lot about line, using the line in and out of the object, and I found that quite fascinating. I'm not quite sure I know what you meant by that.
Right, right. Well, and it's probably one of the harder things to learn in drawing, and but that's what all the great masters had. They were able to take a simple line and make it appear to have depth, that it would go into the surface and come out of the surface, which is essentially the same thing as drawing around. Mm-hmm. You know, it's giving it dimension. And what's interesting about drawing is that it's such a simple medium, because you're just working with line, but it is immediately reflecting what the artist understands. So that's why you don't have to figure out how to make the line do that. You have to change. That's the hard part. You have to actually change the way you see. And when you change that, then the line actually reflects it.
Well, you told a very neat little story about when the first time you realized what drawing around was and seeing, and you were actually on a subway. You said it was very fortuitous that you had left your sketch pad behind.
Right. Well, because you can get a little too involved with how to make it happen and not actually realize the difference between seeing differently. So what happened is I actually saw differently, and then that reflected in the subsequent drawings. Mm-hmm. But in other words, if I had immediately started drawing, possibly I would have lost it, because I would have gotten lost in how I would actually make that happen, thinking I could actually make that happen, as opposed to seeing differently would make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's,
yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
That's one of the things you emphasize, is that when you see differently, then your drawing will change. It's not
Right.
that you need to learn a new technique of how to hold the charcoal or the pencil.
Right.
You need to learn something new up here.
Right, and that's why it's always so challenging, and I think that's why, you know, students struggle with it, because they're trying to make it happen, and drawing comes from inside and how you see, and that is the value of drawing. It's not so much the product of what you end up with, the drawing itself, but it represents what you understand and how you see. And that's actually what you're trying to change, how you see.
You talked a little bit about cameras and how you think they changed the approach to drawing in particular,
Mm-hmm.
but art in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that because what happened is that once you got away from the atelier system, where you would actually apprentice with a master, all those skills and all those crafts then kind of started to become diminished and lessened in terms of their importance, to the point where then when they had projectors or whatever to just trace an image on the canvas and then you could just start painting, people started to think that's all drawing was about, was just to get an image on the canvas in order to paint a painting. And artists know there's more to it than that.
Yeah. You actually have to know what the other side of the mountain looks like to a certain extent before you
Yes.
can paint the side facing you.
Yes, PJ, that is really true.
And you also, and this intrigued me very much, because I find that quite often I prefer the field study to the finished painting, and you talk about doing less to show more.
Right. Well, yes, because in drawing, I mean, there's a whole, you know, with the whole non-objective trend in art, was another reason that the art students have gone away from drawing. And now that it's coming back more towards realism, it's actually gone, the pendulum has gone all the way to the other side. And so most people are doing what is called rendering, which is you are indiscriminately putting in everything that you can see, which I would call copying or rendering. And the real draftsman actually can do quite a lot, convey quite a lot with very little. So in good drawings, they actually don't look labored.
There is an immediacy, I think, to really great art. Whether it may have taken 6 months to do or 30 minutes, it looks like the artist just sat down and whoosh, there it was. And I think it's that immediacy that sometimes really conveys the emotion of the painting or the drawing or whatever.
That you said it. That's it.
Oh, dear.
That's really true. Well, and it's true because I mean, the one thing about drawing that I think everybody will tell you is that it really represents what is in the artist's soul, because it's so naked. It's just so bare.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's exposed.
I have admired artists all my life, because they really do. They sort of let it all hang out on that canvas for anybody who wants to come by and make a comment about it. So
It's true.
well, I found this, I'm not an artist, but I found the language of drawing very useful. I think that I'll be able to take what I have learned from this and use it when I look at art again.
Well, that's good. And I was thinking when I wrote the book that it would be primarily for art students, which is actually why I made it a soft cover. I wanted to make it something that felt nice and was easy to carry with them to class, or, you know, and so I actually had that in mind when I designed it. But I'm finding that actually collectors are interested in it too, because I think that the way that I tell the story, which is just how I learned how to draw, that people can relate to it, because, you know, I certainly talk about all the difficulties I had in doing that. And I think it just makes it a more accessible thing, you know, whereas quite often, you know, art seems so
Remote.
remote. Yes,
Yes.
so remote.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Sherrie, for talking with us about it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.